My employer is dying. He wants to thank you for saving his life. It's an honor to meet the Wolverine.
That's not who I am anymore.
Based on the 1982 comic written by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller, the Wolverine sees Logan travel to Japan to say goodbye to an old acquaintance.
I wanted to repay you, a gift to equal the life you gave me. You have struggled long enough.
But the Wolverine is stripped of his own immortality, and he must face not only his demons, but a brand new nemesis as well.
We will accept your surrender with respect. Is that all the men you brought?
Mr. Hugh Jackman, hello and welcome to
Thanks.
our Sky Movies The Wolverine special.
I love it. Thanks, Alex.
It's great to have you here. So let's start with what is clearly the most pertinent question. This is the 6th time you've played the character. You're already filming a 7th outing for the Wolverine.
I'm glad you said that and made sense of why I'm actually got the mutton chops on now. 'Cause that would start to get a little sad.
It would be quite weird if the line between you and the character began to blur.
What are you talking about?
If you were sort of standing out on the street going, something really should be happening.
Listen,
now.
they are in here. I promise.
But I don't like to start an interview with a bombshell, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I imagine this is a character you quite like playing.
You know, you're very perceptive, Alex. That's why you're brilliant. That's why you brought down high court judges, governments all over the world. Not only do I enjoy it, I'll give you a scoop. I'm enjoying it more than ever. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly why that is. I think I love this particular story, and I've wanted to make this particular storyline for 13 years. It's from a famous comic book, which I always thought would make a great movie, but I think maybe just being a little older works for Wolverine. I mean, not physically, trust me, but everything else works.
Well, I guess so, because you're playing someone who is immortal.
200, 250, 300 years old, exactly.
So therefore, I guess as you get wiser, you sort of tap into what...
Grumpier.
I was going to go for
But you're a good man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now! Just to set the stage, as it were, where do we find Wolverine at the start of this film? Where does it kind of fit in, I guess, to the chronology of the series?
So for fans of the X-Men series, this literally takes place, maybe let's imagine 18 months, 2 years after X-Men 3. At the very end of X-Men 3, Jean Grey, who had become the Phoenix by this point, the Dark Phoenix, is killed by Logan in a very tragic, very emotional sort of ending. And she's killed, and it's pretty much credits roll. So you get no chance as an audience to really sit with the effects of that, what happens to Logan, to Wolverine.
Get here.
Of course.
I'm so sorry.
I know.
I'll never hurt you or anyone.
It's too late.
No!
You can't hide.
No, Gene! No! And the beginning of this movie, we pick up on that. You see him 2 years later. He's now made a vow not to hurt anyone else. And the only way to do that, if you're Logan, is to live like a hermit. He literally lives in a cave up in the mountains of British Columbia. He doesn't want to have anything to do with anyone. He looks, well, he is homeless pretty much. And he's lonely, he's lost, he's directionless, he has no, in a way, reason to live. And he is a guy who's immortal. So it's a great dilemma and a great starting point. It's the lowest you've ever seen him, emotionally. And then as the movie goes on, you gradually see him really sort of asking himself that question of, what do I want to be? What is my meaning? What is my reason to get up every day? And then, of course, you see him vulnerable in a physical way as well. So we really sort of play with a lot of different sides to his complexity, and I think that's what makes it interesting.
Hey, something's done right.
Let go.
You mentioned the comic book this is based on, which, as you quite rightly said, is a fan favourite, and I'm guessing that, coupled with the sort of the Japan backdrop, which really differentiates this film from every other way we've seen Wolverine before, were the two reasons that made this the ideal story to tell?
You know, it's exotic, it's mysterious that this is Japan. Just in general, having been there myself 11 times, and every time it never fails to disappoint. I'm fascinated with the country, and no matter how many times I go there, you always feel like you're a fish out of water, and as amazed and as charmed, and how much I love the place. It's eternally fascinating, and I know for audiences seeing Japan and its customs and its people through Wolverine's eyes is completely different than any other film. And the attention to detail from a design point of view, from actors, in every way, language that we chose, we really wanted to give an authentic experience to people. And I think the storyline, having this guy who's anti-authority, anti-custom, anti-history and tradition and rules, going into this world where it's full of all that, is so interesting and funny and dramatic. So in every way, it's a great conflux of all these ingredients, and it makes for an interesting movie. But beyond that, what we wanted to do, and the reason it's called The Wolverine, is I don't care if you've not seen one X-Men movie. I don't care if you haven't seen the first Wolverine, or even if you have. This one stands alone. This one is The Wolverine. This is where you get to see who he is. You see him in a whole new way, a whole fresh backdrop, and it stands alone. In an action point of view, the bullet train sequence, which is so iconic to Japan. And look, how many movies have there been fights on top of a train? 7 million, you know, but none on top of a train going 200 miles an hour. Everything about this is using what is great and iconic and different about Japan and giving you a twist.
It's a great sequence, and it's surprising. I remember hearing about the bullet train, because it's quite an old piece of technology. As a kid, reading books about trains, and the bullet train, and yet I've never seen a sequence shot on that train or like that before. Before you started, what were the sort of key elements that you wanted to make sure were included in this film to sort of do the character, for you, justice?
When we started, there were a few things we started with. That we had spent a lot of time in the past movies focusing on his lack of memory, which is a brilliant part of the character in the comic books. This man who lives for 200 or 300 years and kind of has no recollection of his past, and yet deep down he knows that it wasn't all pretty. He's probably done some really bad things, but not knowing what it was is a burden. We all felt that we'd exhausted that dramatically we were done with that. And actually, what is interesting is imagine being an immortal person who sort of has lost his reason to live, whose very essence has brought about destruction and pain. Everyone who he's loved has died or passed on. What's it like living with that? So that was sort of a beginning point. That's the starting point. Now for me, Wolverine does not have, on paper, the strongest powers going in X-Men. I mean, if you're looking at a trading card game and you've got Superman or whatever, and you've got all these characters, he has claws and he can heal himself. But as long as you're more than 10 feet away from Wolverine, you've got a shot of beating him, right? So he can't fly, he can't jump, and yet he's by far the most feared. He's the most formidable of them all, and that is his berserker rage. And this was what I really wanted to focus on. This is what I know the fans love, and by the way, they told me this. More berserker rage. And not just seeing him be mad, but where does that come from? What has to happen to a person for them to have this deep well of anger and resentment that can actually become a superpower? And it's not, that thing within him is not superhuman, it's very human. And to explore that and see it, and to see it play out, to see how powerful it is, but also in a way what a burden it is, that's what we really wanted to bring out. And to me, that's the essence of Wolverine.
What kind of monster are you? The Wolverine.
Since his original outing in Bryan Singer's X-Men, Jackman has portrayed Wolverine 6 times and is currently putting on the clause for a 7th to be part of the team for the upcoming X-Men Days of Future Past.
Throw me. Now!
Damn it, Logan! Don't do this!
Class dismissed.
In those 13 years, we have seen Logan fighting in several wars, being experimented on by the military, joining a team of fellow mutants to save the world, and seeing friends die. All the while, still maintaining wonderful hair.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
So, to take you back then, I guess to the beginning, 2000, when you first played the character in X-Men. I mean, 2 things really. First of all, did you ever anticipate 13 years later playing this role again? And I guess also, did you anticipate just how much the fans of this character would embrace you, which is can be quite rare in the comic world, embrace you as an actor being cast as this hero?
It's interesting. It's a good question because I never heard of X-Men before, so I really didn't know when I was auditioning for it. And to be honest, even when I turned up for filming, I was pretty much unaware of how passionate the fans were. Once we'd made the film, I remember we finished the film in February, came out in May or July or something. So there was a gap of about 4 months in there. And not my agent, but several other people said, mate, the word on the street is you've got to get another job before this thing comes out, because once this thing comes out, it's kind of over. So make sure you've got another job just to give yourself one more shot. I said, really? He says, look, it's a comic book movie. And this is a person pretty high up in the business. It's a comic book movie, mate. Comic book movies are dead. I know they're giving it a go, but no one really knows what X-Men is, what's going on. And I think it shocked everyone when it came out. I mean, this is sort of at the beginnings of the internet. I mean, for a lot of people watching this, like, what? Before the internet? But it was, no one really knew how to quantify how big the fan base was. You know, it was, Comic-Con was a way smaller thing back then. And when it came out, I want to say it doubled their predictions. It like literally shocked them. And for me, once it came out, then it really hit me. And I was glad that in general they liked it, because I realized then that if they didn't, I would have been spat on in the street. I mean, it's really one. So I was kind of glad when we made the movie that I didn't have that pressure.
When they come out, does it hurt?
Every time.
People didn't know superhero movies at that point. X-Men was really part of a raft of a few movies that began. They were kind of pioneers, because at that point it was like this guy said, like, a superhero movie. And now they're the blockbusters every year. Those are the movies.
You know, I think not just the beginning. I mean, part of the. I honestly think Bryan Singer, and when Fox commissioned that movie, that was very brave, very risky. It was literally the first. That what broke the mold. Spider-Man came straight after it. Then following on, obviously, to Batman. And funnily enough, I did a film with Chris Nolan, and he told me, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he said to me, he said, you know, for many years he wanted to play direct Batman. And he had the version that he eventually did in his head for maybe 10 years. He said, but, you know, I wasn't a name. I had no chance of making it. And he said, I'll never forget walking into a cinema watching X-Men, and as the first 20 minutes rolled by, he was like, that's my idea. This is the version of Batman I wanted to make. He said, this was the first time. He said, I think you can make superhero movies, comic book movies, where people care about the characters and people get involved, and you actually see a human side to them rather than just and spectacular flying and things like that. So it was a bold choice at the time, and no one knew what was going to happen with it.
This is just a misunderstanding.
Put the knives down!
I can't.
You've always been ripped as Wolverine. I've never seen you look in this movie though. There's a bit where you're chopping with the axe, and there's a vein in this arm, and I was disconcerted. I was like, that thing is gonna burst. It's like it's pulsing, and like, I mean, I'm coming at this from a guy whose muscles don't so much ripple as struggle, but I imagine you had to put in the hours more than ever before.
I did. I saw the movie with my mum last night, and my mum was like, oh, you poor thing. I passed on this horrible thing of your veins showing. You know, she said she's watching the movie, and she said, my whole life, I had these veins, and I always wished I didn't have them. And then I saw my boy with them, and I was like, you poor thing. And I was like, no, Mum, it's a good thing. For this character, that's what I want, so thank you. She said, well, I'm glad it was good for something, you know. But I had to train harder, and actually, I'll give you the truth. I lost quite a lot of weight deliberately for Les Mis, and I kept training at the gym, so I kept strength, but I was much skinnier, very skinny and gaunt in the face. And I rang The Rock, because we're mates, Dwayne Johnson and I said, mate, what have I got to do? Tell me what you're doing, because I'm watching him in movies, jump from movie to movie, and I see him be much bigger or change his body shape. And he said, 6,000 calories a day, 3 hours of working out, 2 hours in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, minimum. And he said, you need 6 months. He says, if you want to do it, you need 6 months. He says, you're far older than me, Jackman, and you need 6 months minimum to do it. And so
inspirational.
So I tried that for about 2 days, and he's crazy. I actually sort of held it. I kind of went for it, and I did it, and that was the result. But I complained and whinged the entire time. My wife was like, shut up, you love it, get out there.
It works for you. It's working for you. It is. It's kind of aspirational. And
well, you know, you ask, I'm going to say, it's going to sound sort of like I'm having a joke, but I'm not. The body or his physicality is so important for that character, because what sets him apart from, I'm not going to mention other mutants in the X-Men series, but what sets him apart is that he's feral. I don't care who you are, how powerful you are, you do not want him as an enemy. And when that guy, he doesn't talk a lot, Wolverine, but when in that guy, you see him in a tank top and a shirt, you're like, I'm not going to look this guy in the eye. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just going to be too hard. And that physically has to speak. So it's not, I'm not trying to, hey, look, I'm buffed and da-da-da. I want it to look frightening. So that's why I had to go to that level.
I guess this is, we've come full circle, really, because we started off by talking about the 7th time you're going to be playing the character, which you're filming right now. And obviously, that is going to be X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
2 things, really. First of all, it must be lovely to have gone full circle in that respect and be working with Bryan Singer, the first director you worked with on the character. And also, secondly, what can we expect?
Well, mate, I every day I go on set, and particularly the first day I went on set back with Bryan Singer, and it was me and Hallie and Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, Anna Paquin, Ellen Page, Sean Ashmore, and there we were on this set 13 years after we began with Bryan, and who hasn't aged a bit. I got to work out what's going on there.
Mutant.
I felt grateful. I really felt grateful. I realised this is such a rare thing in our business, for any show, to be able to do that and to have something that is, trust me, this movie is big. It is really dramatic. It's a really great idea. I think it's by far the biggest of all of them, and I'm really, really excited about it. And then, a month later, because the way the scheduling worked, we did the future part first because Ian and Patrick are doing a play together. Mm-hmm. So then we go to the past, and because I don't know, anyway, I don't want to tell too much, but it's the younger versions of it, and it's McAvoy and Fassbender and Jennifer Lawrence and Nicholas Hoult and all these unbelievable characters, plus Peter Dinklage, you know, Omar. It's literally the greatest ensemble I've ever seen, and every day it's a treat to go to work. And I've successfully talked for about 3 minutes without telling you anything about it, except
It's good.
It takes place in the future and the past. But I'll give you a little tip. If those who want to know a little bit about X-Men Days of Future Past, stick around to the end of the credits. And it's, by the way, I think it's halfway through the credits. So people are like, really? 7 minutes? I'm not sticking around. But 3 or 4 minutes in, stick around, and there's a cool little teaser for what's coming up.
I heard people yelping during that teaser.
Did you really?
With excitement.
No, I think it's going to shock a lot of people. And excite them,
Brilliant. As always, an absolute pleasure, Mr.
Thanks,
Hugh
Alex.
Jackman.
You too, mate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Your grandfather called me a Ronin. Samurai without a master. Who has no reason to live.
Was he right?